Number 12 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. I'd like to start the meeting by providing some information following the motion that was adopted by the House on Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020. The committee is now sitting in a hybrid format, meaning that members can participate either virtually or by video conference or appear in person. All members, regardless of their method of participation, will be counted for the purposes of quorum. Witnesses must always appear virtually. Of course, today we do have the House administration that are physically present there today. So thank you. The committee's power, like you know, is limited to sittings by the priority use of House of Commons resources determined by the whips. And any questions must be decided on by a recorded vote. And today we will be voting on the estimates and the main estimates and the supplementary estimates, just to let you all know. Of course, the committee can deliberate in camera, provided that it takes into account the potential risks to confidentiality inherent in such deliberations with remote participants. So today's proceedings are going to be made available via the House of Commons website. And a reminder to everyone, I think everyone here is probably an expert now at this. The entirety of the committee will not be shown on the website, only the speaker that is speaking. So I think it's good to have that in mind. And you can use either choice of floor English or French on your screen for those that are participating virtually. And I believe, I was stating before, and hopefully it continues to work through some innovation. We no longer have to switch when we're switching languages that we're speaking. So that is fantastic because that definitely held things up in the past. Okay, with that being said, remember everybody just to speak slowly and clearly and to also wear your headset. It has been very difficult on the interpreters, so let's be mindful of that. And, it's mandatory to wear the headset. So please let me know if there's some kind of problem and you can't receive a headset because I just heard that there was an issue. We'll try to help as best as possible to facilitate if any issues arise where you can't get access to a headset with a boom mic. Okay. With that being said, as you know, wait till you're called upon by me to begin speaking. Unmute your own mic, and you're going to have to mute your own mic. It's not done automatically, and so please remember to do that. And if there's any points of orders, just unmute your mic and state that you have a point of order. And if anyone wants to speak to that point of order, then please use the raised hand function at the bottom of your screen. So today, like I said, is meeting number 12. It's Tuesday, November 24th, and we're going to be meeting from 11 to 1:30. We're going to have two panels. The first panel we have appearing before us is the Speaker of the House, the Honorable Anthony Rhoda, and we have, of course, the Clerk of the House, Mr. Robert. Thank you for being with us again, Mr. Patrice, Mr. Piquet. And we have Parliamentary Protective Services at this within this panel as well. So welcome to the Director of Parliamentary Protective Services. There are quite a few participants in this meeting. And just to let you know, there are other House of Commons administrative staff here, just in case there are some questions that the speaker or Mr. Robert cannot answer, although I find that hard to believe that there would be many questions where you would not be able to answer, or Mr. Leahy and Mr. Patrice. There are others to supplement and help out so that we get the most fulsome answers possible. And of course, we have, in case anybody doesn't know, Mr. Piquet is the Chief Financial Officer because we're dealing with the estimates. So we will start with the speaker. Mr. Speaker, please, with your opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. And it's a pleasure to see all of you again, whether it's in person or virtually. Les 9 derniers mois ont été
The past 9 months have been, to say the least, challenging. We, members of Parliament, our staff, and the employees of the administration who support us, have all had to deal with professional and personal trials, even as we work to continue the business of Parliament in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic.
several years, the administration has invested in technology infrastructure, recognizing the importance of providing members with the ability to connect to their constituents and their staff, and giving administration employees the means to stay in touch with the organization network from anywhere at any time. As a result, the investment made by the administration enabled both parliamentarians and employees to be securely and reliably connected to the House of Commons and to one another. These investments formed the building blocks for the hybrid system we're using in the second session of the 43rd Parliament. Now, we all rely on the technology, and I'm grateful to the talented and dedicated employees who have helped us to, as we are doing today. As Speaker of the House of Commons, I will be presenting the main estimates and supplementary estimates B for the fiscal year 2020-2021 for the House of Commons and the Parliamentary Protective Services. I am joined by officials from both organizations. As mentioned earlier by the chair, representing the House of Administrations, we have Charles Robert, who is the clerk of the House of Commons, Michel Patrice, who is the Deputy Clerk Administration, and Daniel Paquette, who is the Chief Financial Officer. From PPS, I am joined by Kevin Leahy, the Director of the Service, Robert Graham, Administrative and Personal Officer, and Antonia Francis, Director of Human Resource Services. I will begin by presenting the key elements and the key themes of the 2020-2021 main estimates for the House of Commons. These estimates total $516.4 million, representing a net increase of $13 million or 2.6% compared with 2019-2020's main estimates. To start, the funding of $4.7 million for cost of living increases covers requirements for the House administration, members, and House officers' budgets, as well as a statutory increase of the members' sessional allowance and additional salaries. The annual budget adjustments for members and House officers are based on the Consumer Price Index. Cost of living increases are essential to our recruitment effort and to those of the House administration. Returning to major investments, the Board of Internal Economy approved an increase of $4.4 million in this area. Ce financement sert à
This funding supports new HR advisory services for members, as well as a digital office solution introduced for the 43rd Parliament. This solution facilitates collaboration and greatly enhances the ability of members and their staff to find relevant information and securely access their work from any device. We have seen how much more we are relying on these functionalities.
Another focus for major investments, which this committee has seen in the past, is the funding requirements to support information technology systems and assets when they are transferred to the House of Commons within the context of the long-term vision and plan. I would now like to move to the increase of $2.3 million for the adjustment for members and House officers. This comprises of funding for the addition of a recognized party following last general election. Funds were also required for the House of Commons contributions to members' pension plans. These costs are contributed by the Treasury Board. Similarly, the main estimates account for adjustment to the contributions for the House of Commons Employee Benefit Plan. While the main estimates had originally identified funding for Parliamentary Assembly and Conference, it will come as no surprise that the 29th annual session of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly has been cancelled, and that the 65th Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference has been postponed until August 2021. As a result, this funding has been used to reduce the funding request in the Supplementary Estimates B. Looking more closely at Supplementary Estimates B, our first line item confirms that temporary funding in the amount of $16.3 million has been sought for the operating budget carry forward. The board's policy allows members, House officers, and administration to carry forward unspent funds from one fiscal year to the next up to a maximum of 5% of the operating budget in their main estimates. In addition, we sought $5.5 million in 2020-2021 to fund economic increases for House administration employees. Further, $816,000 is allocated for contributions to employee benefits plans. I will now move to the 2020-2021 main estimates for the Parliamentary Protective Services. For the 2020-21 fiscal year, the services budget request totaled $92.6 million, which represents an increase of $1.66 million from the previous year. This amount served to cover economic increases, wage adjustments, related to collective bargaining decisions. It should be noted that the service is not seeking additional funding through the 2020-21 supplementary estimates process. Since the service's last appearance before this committee in April 2019, it has made significant and sustained progress in further stabilizing its budgets. As such, the services will not be requesting an increase to its appropriation for fiscal year 2021-2022 efforts. As the function previously performed by the RCMP have been progressively transitioned to the service, the organization has become more efficient overall. En 5 ans, le service a franchi.
At 5 years of age, the service has advanced through a series of important developmental phases, from the tactical to the strategic. While it was created through the amalgamation of previously existing services, it is successfully managing the integration of the many systems and processes that it inherited, and it is making significant progress towards unifying its workforce. The service has matured into an organization that applies strategic and business planning best practices, and it implements financial safeguard mechanisms and resource optimization initiatives, and also appreciates the importance of diversity, inclusion, well-being, and mental health.
Funds made available to the service continue to be well aligned with the mandate and priorities of ensuring the physical safety of parliamentarians, employees, and visitors on Parliament Hill and in the parliamentary precinct. Excuse me. Madam Chair, this concludes my overview of the main and supplementary estimates for the House of Commons and Parliamentary Protective Service. We would be pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, we'll start with our first round of 6-minute questions with Mr. Lukiski.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Robert, it's good to see you. For years, I used to be on this committee, back in a former life, at least in a former government. For 9 years, I was on PROC, so quite regularly we had appearances from speakers and House administration personnel before us. But this is my first chance to greet both of you, so I'm glad that you're here with us. I mean, I go all the way back to the days of William Corbett, so I've been around. I've seen my share of speakers and clerks, but I'm very pleased to have both of you here today to answer some questions. My first question would be posed to Michel Robert, and it's more of a curiosity than anything else. It seems to me that there's a number of new faces at the clerk's table in the House of Commons, although it's difficult to tell with everyone wearing masks. Is this normal at the start of a new parliament? Are we seeing more of a turnover of clerks and personnel than we have in recent past?
There's a issue with the sound. It's not connecting. It sounds like you're speaking from very far away. If you could just test the sound. Nope.
Madam Chair, there seems to be a problem with the clerk's audio. We'll look into it if we can maybe suspend. If you can maybe suspend for a minute or so.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
I can hear you now, Mr.
All
Rebecca.
right. Again, I'm technology challenged, so you have to bear with that. I don't think, in fact, that there has been a significant turnover in terms of the staff that you see at the table. There have been some retirements in recent months, and there have been competitions to replace them. I don't think it's much more than that at the moment.
You just put that down to normal attrition, I assume, then, sir?
Yes, sir. That's right.
Then perhaps you could expand upon what are some of the challenges and the associated costs with those challenges in recruitment and training. I'm assuming that if you're looking for a new procedural clerk, whether it be for committee or at the table, it's not as simple as just walking down to a local job fair and looking for interested candidates or putting an ad on ZipRecruiter. You're talking about people who have a highly developed skill set that would be unique probably only to an environment such as the House of Commons. How challenging is it to invest time and what costs are incurred trying to find some qualified people? And then, of course, I hope you would be able to retain those people for an extended period of time to ensure some continuity. But what challenges do you find, Monsieur Robert? Could you share with the committee, have you found it difficult to find qualified personnel in years past and currently?
I will give you a short answer and then turn it over to Andre, who's the Deputy Clerk of Procedure. But in fact, I think in the House of Commons, we have actually built quite a deep pool of talent. And so for recruitment purposes, we tend to select people from inside. And in fact, it's a way to acknowledge the work done by those who want to make a career here and advance over the course of a number of years. But I'll let Andre finish with a more comprehensive reply.
Good morning, Mr. Lukivsky. I hope you're hearing me well. I would just add to what the clerk has just mentioned that in terms of the number of table officers, what you've probably seen is we have increased the number of table officers. We call them TO3, table officer 3, because we've added, because of the virtual proceedings, a certain number of other individuals that come and support us in the House. So that's probably why you've noticed a couple of more individuals in the House. Those individuals are either manager at the procedural services or very, very experienced procedural clerks. In terms of recruiting procedural clerks, yes, we've been lucky enough to being able to recruit a certain number of procedural clerks over the years, and we are quite lucky to have extensive retention capabilities. Why is that? Is that because we offer a good, not only good training opportunities, but also different career opportunities, so that you will see, and you've probably seen since the beginning of your career here, some procedural clerks working as a committee clerk, working in international affairs, or working at the journals branch. So we're quite lucky with that work, that team force.
Thank you very much. And I suspect that some of our new MPs who have only been recently elected have missed out on some of the activities of the table clerks that I found to be extremely interesting and almost entertaining over years past, particularly at the start of a new parliament. If you have a new table clerk who calls the vote for the first time, and having 338 MPs stand up, deliver their names and riding names, and at sometimes correct perfectly, it always ends up with a big round of applause, well-deserved from all parliamentarians. That's something I miss, quite frankly, in a virtual parliament. But thank you for the answers, and thank you for expanding on the challenges you found on the recruitment and training end. Madam Clerk, how much time do I have left? I do have a question or two left for both the Speaker and Monsieur Robert.
You have a little over a minute.
Thank you. I want to turn my attention now, Speaker Rhoda, to you on security supports for members of Parliament. We have heard recent reports that there will be new security supports being delivered to members of Parliament. I think all of this, or much of it at least, came in light of the news report we heard a few months ago where Mr. Singh was confronted, I won't say accosted, but confronted on the streets as he was walking to Parliament by a citizen. Could either you or Monsieur Robert expand upon what security supports members of Parliament may be able to expect in the coming months, if any?
I'll just start off and then hand it over to Mr. Robert. The security of members is something that has been a concern since first being elected. We've had a number of meetings, not only with our own security people, but also with legislatures and speakers around the world, England and New Zealand and other places where we have been able to learn from each other, which is important. And that's something that we want to make sure that all of our members are safe, and we do everything that we can to protect them. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Robert or Mr. Leahy, or our Sergeant at Arms, Pat McDonnell, will take it from here.
Thank you. If you can quickly, please.
Hi, Pat McDonnell here.
Hello,
morning,
Sergeant.
everybody.
Good morning.
Hi. Yeah, so BOY has approved additional security measures for members, and that's in line with best practices. To give the details of those security measures, we'd be better off doing that in camera.
Well, that was very quick. Thank you very much. Next, we have Mr. El Gabra for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Still morning, so good morning, everyone, Speaker, Clerk, and staff. I do want to take a second to express my gratitude and appreciation to the staff and the entire team of the House of Commons at all levels for their amazing accommodation and adjustment during this pandemic. The whole machinery had to turn on a dime, and they did it very quickly and professionally, from IT to cleaning services to other staff. So I want to take a moment to acknowledge that, whether it was during, by the way, the Committee of the Whole to now a virtual sitting of Parliament. And it's worthy of acknowledgement and appreciation. This is a question either to the Speaker or to the Clerk. I'm interested in knowing an update on the voting app that we heard about.
I think actually we could go to Stéphane Aubé.
Okay. You may want to reduce your, lower your mic.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I wasn't supposed to. Anyways, thank
Sorry
you, sir.
about
Thank you for the question. No. Thank you for the question. So as you know, we've since September we've been working to actually develop a tool that could be allowed that could allow the members to actually vote. We're still in consultation with the whips. The whips of each of the recognized parties. We've made a presentation to them over the last weeks. We're awaiting some feedback from them on some key functionality that would be required from them. And then once when finalizing that, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, if the decision is made forward by all the parties, we will be able to proceed with the onboarding of members so that we can start training and planning some simulations if the decision is made to go forward with this, sir.
So, Mr. Ube, do you have an expectation of a date when that's going to happen?
We don't have a commitment for a date yet. I would leave that to different parties to make that decision. But from a readiness perspective, we're almost there. We're just waiting for these decisions to be made. And as soon as they're made, we'll be able to engage all the members from the different parties if they decide to go forward, sir.
Thank you very much.
If I could chime in just for a moment on that, the IT department under Mr. Obey has been very, very visionary and has been planning to accommodate whatever the members of the House really want to do. And they've been, as soon as somebody mentions something, they fall into place and do their due diligence to see what can be done. And they've been very effective on having everything ready should the members, should the membership of the House decide to go in that route. So I just wanted to compliment them and recognize their hard work and their diligence and making sure that everything is there for us when we decide to, as a House.
Thank you for saying that, Speaker. And I can attest to this. I had to change my entire hardware at the constituency office, making sure that we have House managed devices. And my team and I went through a smooth transition period, and it was done quickly and proficiently. So again, thank you. Speaker, maybe a question to you or again the clerk. One of the issues that we're having to deal with today because of some of the, I guess, the cleaning requirement is availability of meeting rooms. So there are times when we used to book a meeting room right after another meeting, and now we are having to wait, so that reduces the number of room availability. Is there anything that can be done there to ensure that there are more options?
Maybe I'll pass this one on to the clerk. I know that we've gotten to the point where a lot of the committees can meet now. I mean, initially there was some ramping up that had to be done. But again, with all the work that's been going on in the background, I'm not sure about in person, but as far as doing it virtually like we're doing now, we've come a long way and we pretty well are ready to accommodate, whether it's translation or services that way. I don't know, Charles, did you want to?
There's an issue with sound again, the same.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I'll wait for the yellow box. Mr. Algaba, the issue that comes up is the allocation of the resources that are available in addition to the health protocols that have to be followed when we move from one event to the other. We, on the committee side, for example, there has been a ramp up of services that we are offering this week. We now can do 54 events, but there is going to be a ceiling, I guess, at some point, as long as we are obliged to meet either in hybrid or virtual format. I can ask the clerk, the deputy clerk of procedure, to offer supplementary information, but I think, in fact, we have done pretty well as much as we can for the moment in providing support to you.
Go ahead, Mr. Gagnon. Are you going to say something? Or
thank you, Mr. Garba. Just a short addition to what the clerk has just mentioned. This increase in service provided from all the services at the House of Commons, including as well services provided by the Translation Office, has been done through the Whip's office, and a great collaboration has taken place there. And that's why we were able to increase significantly the amount of services and possibilities for members to do so. That said, working with the different time zones and working with the different protocol that need to be followed, it makes it very difficult to increase significantly more the possibilities for the future. That said, I know that we're working very actively to at least try to evaluate and anticipate future needs. but clearly working with the different whips has been quite useful. And I would probably encourage you to do so and contact your whip's office if there is a special need for a, let's say, special meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Gagnon. Monsieur Terrien for 6 minutes.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Good. I'm very pleased to have you all here today, and I'd like to congratulate you for all the work that you've done and for your clear remarks. I think we all agree on the quality of your work. Now, in terms of the estimates, I'd like to ask a question first about security. Now, when Jagmeet Singh called me a racist, I got all kinds of hate mail at the time. And one of the problems in our work is social media. I have received so many threats. I've received several death threats, actually. And what that means is that my house actually had to be under supervision by the local police in my riding. So what I'd like to know from the outset is how member safety works. For example, are you contacted? Is it the RCMP who's supposed to be responsible? Who contacts the police? Because my office contacted police because they were afraid for my safety. My children actually saw police stationed in front of my house. I have an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old. They thought that was very strange. They were very concerned and afraid. So I'd just like to hear you speak to that. How did you proceed in that case? Were you even involved in my particular case? Well, that's something we take very seriously. And we do things even before they begin. We were ready. We have been ready, I would say, for just about anything. But what I could do, perhaps, is allow the Sergeant-at-Arms to explain to us exactly what has been done. Many of this, of course, has to be discussed in camera. We don't necessarily want this to be a public discussion, but I'll give the floor to the sergeant, and perhaps he can give you more details up to a certain point. This may be a conversation that will have to be taken offline at one point. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This will be a very short conversation because we can't really speak about security measures unless we're in camera. In fact, that's about all I can say right now. Thank you, then. Well, this is an episode that I experienced, I went through, and I realize it's exceptional. However, my colleague, Mr. Lukiski, also referred to these matters. My own leader has received threats as well. We have asked for greater security for our leader and for all, actually, opposition leaders. And I get the impression, it may sound strange, but I get the impression this doesn't happen very quickly. Mr. Terrien, I can assure you that at every meeting of the Board of Internal Economy, we talk about security. And we have been doing so over the past few weeks. We'll be talking again about it this Thursday, about exactly that, security for the Prime Minister and opposition leaders and for all members. I'm raising this because social media are sometimes on fire when it comes to certain events, and political parties, including the NDP, has called the Bloc Québécois and Bloc Québécois members racist, and that doesn't help. That can have an impact, and it has not made our lives very, very easy. Now, I'd like to come back to the estimates quite briefly. Please tell me if I'm mistaken. I believe this question is for Mr. Rota, but I'm not certain of that. The biggest increases have been with respect to staff. That represents $14 million. And if I go by what you stated earlier, that is simply because of the fact that salaries have increased. And that's about the only major increase that I can see. Am I right? Yes. And I'll refer the question to Mr. Paquette, who will be able to answer you in greater detail. Thank you. Yes, a big part of that $14 million has to do with the increase in cost of living. That's about $5.6 million. And the other factors are this. We also were given approval to increase our capacity to support members. So there was a team that was set up to provide human resources support to members, and that represents a little more than $2 million. There were some other things as well that happened. For example, the capacity for law clerks was also increased. So anytime there's a change in teams, and we know salaries represent a huge cost, there are increases. Also, we've had to standardize computers and writings. So there was another team that was added for that purpose. And there was also an approval before we moved into lockdown for video broadcasting and webcasting. And we needed a team for that. So obviously all these things contribute to that overall increase. And that's where that $14 million comes from. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very clear. I have a last quick question. I'm not sure how much time I have, but there's a marked decrease in the purchase of equipment and maintenance. Year over year, that seems to be going down. Can you explain that? Well, what has happened is that there were a few years when we had to purchase a significant amount of equipment for our long-term vision and plan. And so that had to do, for example, with the refurbishment of the West Block and Wellington building. And that infrastructure was purchased, was implemented. And so like in any situation, those situations become stable, but then, of course, things get worn down again, and then there's another increase in the future. So that all depends on the life cycle of the equipment that we purchase. Well, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our witnesses for sharing their time with us today. Those of us who were here in the last Parliament remember the collective bargaining process with the PPS as being one where PPS members felt quite disrespected and had to fight really hard to make headway. Ultimately, that went to arbitration, and they did get a raise through the arbitration process. I'm wondering if someone could confirm for us whether the back pay for 2015 to 2018 has been paid out to PPS members, or if they're still waiting for that back pay to be issued.
I know there's been a lot of change in the morale around around the hill with PPS, but what I'll do is I'll maybe pass this on to Mr. Leahy, and he'll be able to give us more details on that.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Blakey, for the question. I'm wondering, Madame Francis, if you would have an update on the status of the back pay as a result of the arbitration decisions.
I do, Director Leahy. We have most individuals who have been paid out. We do have some individuals who are, we expect to have the pay process completed in December, and that is due to the challenges with the Phoenix pay system, the retroactivity. So that is what's taking some time. We recently sent out an update to the individuals who are currently being paid by the Senate for us on our behalf. And they're the ones who are we have outstanding payments for and an adjustment to their premium. So we do anticipate that to be completed in December of 2020.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I wonder, Mr. Speaker, if you might inform the committee what steps you're taking to try and ensure a less antagonistic bargaining process, because the agreement determined by arbitration will expire, and the parties will be back at the table. And I think we would like to see a much better process where members of the PPS feel that they're being respected by those that they are negotiating with. So I just wonder if you've begun any initiative to try and change the bargaining strategy of management in order to conduce to a more amicable negotiating process.
As I mentioned, we've already started that, and there is better relationship between both management and PPS members. Maybe I'll pass that one back on to Mr. Leahy or Ms. Francis to maybe give us some information on it. Because
Mr. Speaker, Madam Chair, Mr. Blakey, that's the relationship that we have with the members of our union and their representatives has been a priority of mine and the rest of the team since my arrival at PPS in June of 2019. We've worked very, very hard over the last 15, 18 months to create an atmosphere where there's respect and cordial and collegial work done with the representatives of the workers. I think we've made great progress in that regard, to the point where just very recently we issued a joint statement with the president of the union following recent mediation, where collectively we resolved to turn resolutely towards the future with the confidence that our relationship has been reset on a solid and positive foundation. We collectively committed to working together in a determined manner to maintain a positive relationship from now on, and to cooperate in order to promptly address and constructively resolve differences that may arise in the future. So my team and I are 100% committed to continuing to work to maintain that relationship and the progress that we've made over the last 18 months.
Well, thank you for that commitment, and thank you for the work you're doing to make that real. And please know that there are many members who are watching this closely and would like to see you succeed in that endeavor. I wanted to ask, Mr. Speaker, one of the things that's become, or one of the issues that has arisen in parliamentary life as a result of the pandemic has been the question for some members of what to do when they travel home from Ottawa. And this was, particularly, well, I think it's an ongoing question. At one time, Ottawa was one of the hot spots in the country, and where other places had less instances of COVID-19. And I think it's fair to say that no member wants to be responsible for bringing the virus back into their community during a period where cases are relatively low. Many of us have made room in our travel budget by being in Ottawa less as a result of the hybrid parliament. I'm wondering if you've put your mind to the question of whether members might be able to use some of their travel budget to self-isolate in their own city upon return from Ottawa, particularly if self-isolating at home would mean massive disruption to family life, where there's a spouse who has a job, children who are in school, and self-isolating at home means pulling the family out of their work and their school obligations. There's been some thinking, because it wouldn't involve extra financial exposure for the House if it's coming out of existing travel budgets. There's been some thought put to allowing MPs to use their travel budget for that purpose.
Maybe I'll pass this one on. I'll just comment on a little bit on it at first, though, because it's one of the things that we have been working with individual members to make sure that their equipment is up to date, and also that if they are using equipment, it has to be mainly the house equipment, so that we can interject and make sure that it's working correctly. As far as requests for money from their travel budgets, I don't think we've had any of that requested yet, but it's certainly something that could be considered. I mean, I'll pass this on to, I guess, Monsieur Paquette, since it involves a financial decision. Monsieur Paquette.
Right,
Very quickly, please.
Yes, for sure. So we've been looking at various of our policies and have gone to the board to adjust some of the and add the flexibility needed for the COVID situation, the pandemic situation. This is one, I'll be honest, is new to me today to look at this. So I'm willing to, I'll take this away and we can try to look at it and come back to the board and possibly look at some of these options here to consider if this is feasible to use the travel budgets for members to isolate at home, or actually be in essence on travel status when they are in their constituency. So we'll look into this.
Thank you. And I'm sure Mr. Blakey, Mr. Christofferson, who used to be a member of this committee at one point before you, would very much appreciate the line of questioning that you just asked, because he had he had a flair for and a passion for many things, but that was definitely a concern that he did share, and he served. And I was just thinking about him right now from 1990 all the way to 2019, first in the legislature in Ontario and then here since 2004. And he was a really passionate member, and I definitely learned a lot from him. So if you do see him, I'm going to try to get in touch with him again, please say my hello. Next, we've got Mr. Tucker for the 5-minute, the second round, and you have 5 minutes, Mr. Tucker.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker or Madam Chair, and thank you to our clerk and Mr. Speaker, and to all officials that are here today. I appreciate the hard work you're doing during these trying times. My line of questioning is around cost savings, and I'd like to hear from the clerk if he's asked for any official cost savings review of any of the departments. Hello?
Yep.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, well, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. Oh, there we are. Not per se. We have been careful about how we supervise our expenditures to make sure that we are able to provide the support and services that the members need. Mr. Tucker, as you may realize, when we went into hyper mode, if you like, warp speed to bring about the virtual and the hybrid sittings, there were expenditures that were incurred in order to make that possible in terms of overtime. But without that kind of effort, we would not have been able to provide the support that the House and parliamentarians need.
And to Mr. Speaker, have you asked any of your, or asked for any official review on if there's savings? Because there's going to be natural savings that come from operating a parliament during COVID, natural savings on less travel, but have we asked formally for any review, or is that something that we're just not interested in?
Well, no, that's something that's done on a regular basis just to see where we could save. I mean, and in these times when you're spending like we're doing, I mean, you look at everything and you try to maximize whatever you are putting into it. You know what? Maybe I'll pass this on to Mr. Patrice, who can maybe give us a little bit more detail on some of the actions that have been taken to date.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Are you hearing? Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, we are constantly monitoring the cost saving and actually the expenditure in relation to COVID that we've been having since the start of the pandemic. We gave a report, the administration gave a report to the board in early October in terms of the status of the expenditure and saving that we've noticed since the start of the pandemic. And we're going to provide a further update to the board in the meeting on December. So obviously, as you can imagine, there were savings in relation to travel costs for members, but some technology offset costs that we had in relation to preparing for the virtual, hybrid, and parliament and committees.
Thank you very much. And to the clerk, has there been any layoffs due to the pandemic within your staff?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
And how many individuals?
Yeah, it was not per se layoff, Mr. Tucker. It was more in relation to some contracts or not renewed that we would have in relation to the normal cycle in terms of the activity of Parliament. So there was 83 individuals that was in that situation.
And how many individuals were brought on? Different individuals.
The answer would be no, none.
You mean in terms of the current contingent of the administration staff?
Correct.
The administration have been continued to work and operate during the pandemic. So what has happened since the start of the pandemic in mid-March, a lot has transitioned to working from home. So in terms of people that come on site to work, it depends on the nature of the activities and to maintain the operation of committees or the chamber.
All right, and I understand some of the sensitivities. I'm going to switch gears on the security. How do we measure the security risk for members? If that's not, it might have to wait until we're in camera, but I'd like to know, how do we actually measure that?
Quickly, please. Yes. Mr. Obey. Oh, no.
No, I
Mr.
believe we'll
Leahy.
go to Mr. Leahy on that
Leahy, Mr. Leahy, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We work collectively with law enforcement partners and the intelligence community to determine the overall threat environment domestically. With respect to the individual security threats faced by certain parliamentarians, I think that the Sergeant at Arms would be better positioned to respond to those questions.
If you'd like, maybe if there's something you'd like to say in 10 seconds, we are over
Point
time.
of order, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
I just truly, I really feel that we have to be very aware that these are conversations that are taking place in camera, and I certainly appreciate that it's really important for all of us, but I really believe that we should, if we're going to have these conversations, they should really be in camera, as we don't want to put ourselves at an elevated risk.
Fair enough. I do think if the members are interested, we could have a meeting about this issue if there's interest, and I know that Mr. Tucker is interested by his line of questioning, and I think there was a few other questions. Mr. Terrien had quite a few questions, and obviously it's very concerning to hear that he's been facing the threats that he has, and I'm sure there's many other stories too. So,
point of order.
Yes, Mr. Doherty.
I was going to save it for my time when we for questioning, but it has been raised a number of times now, and we've got both the Sergeant of Arms as well as other members of House Administration. I think we should move to in camera to continue this conversation. Clearly, I think our colleagues have some serious conversations. You know, as we all know, that the world is getting more and more divisive, and online attacks as well as the threats to members of Parliament becoming more and more pervasive. And I think that it would serve us well to be able to have a sense of appreciation of where we're at, and be knowing that our parliamentary protective services have the resources that they need to be able to conduct their roles accordingly.
On that point of order, Madam Chair.
Hold on, Mr. Gerritsen. I believe Ms. Vecchio is next, and then it could be you.
Hi, thank you very much. And you know, just as my colleague was indicating here, I think this is a very important conversation that we're having, especially after what Mr. Terrien has shared with his situations. I know that a number of other members have gone through things, and unfortunately we're seeing it a little bit crazy out there in the world right now, that we do need to make sure that we're taking into consideration that we are safe. So I too would believe that going in camera, I recognize that I'm looking at these panels, we've got the best of the best on these panels, so trying to orchestrate it once again might be difficult. So perhaps we can talk about going into camera and vote on that. Thank you.
We have Mr. Gerritsen and then Mr. Blakey.
I was just going to say that I think that it's a great conversation to have, but there are some questions. Not everybody has questions related to that particularly should be stuff that's dealt with in camera. We do have other items that I think people have questions that are legitimate to pose in the public, and that the public have a right to know the answers to those questions. Would it be possible to arrange a separate in-camera meeting where we could exclusively deal with items that were of the nature that of items that should be in camera? I think that would be my preference. The questions that I have to ask, I actually would like those to be on the public record. I want people to be able to see the answers to my questions. They are not of a nature that deserves to be in camera. And then the other aspect is there's a bunch of work that needs to happen here to go in camera, which is going to delay our meeting and cut off our opportunity to ask questions. So my preference would be that we invite the witnesses back for a separate in-camera meeting so that we can discuss items that should be discussed in camera.
Okay, Mr. Blakey, real quickly, if you guys can, because we're cutting into time for the speakers and we only have them until 1:30.
Sure. I mean, along similar lines, I'm open to going in camera almost now. I do have another question that I wanted to ask that doesn't pertain to security, so I'd just ask that if we are going to go in camera, be able to do that. Alternatively, if we'd like to arrange for another meeting time, but I think that's probably not possible between now, certainly not now and December 11th, because I know our schedule is very tight. So I do have another question, and maybe if members just want to, if we could go in camera for the, from 10 minutes from now and for 20 minutes or something like that. But anyway, I'm open to different ideas.
I have discussed it very quickly with the clerk, and it is going to be difficult in today's meeting. It does take, we've done it before. It takes almost 15 minutes to transition from public to in camera. I'm just wondering whether you guys would be okay with discussing things that we can at this point publicly, and then still be comfortable with voting on the estimates today. But I could then set a separate meeting where we could talk about just the security issue and bring in only the relevant witnesses for that, and we could have one full meeting on that issue. And I think it's very important. But I don't think that it necessarily is necessary for us to vote on the estimates today to have that in-depth discussion. So I know it's difficult, Mr. Blakey, like you said, to find that time, and we don't really have that up until the winter break. So it could be in January that we have to find that time, unless I can manage to talk to the whips and see if there's an extra time. Monsieur Terrier? Oh, Mr. Turnbull, and then Mr. Terrier.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I really appreciated Mr. Gerritson's comments. I totally value the opportunity to have an in-camera discussion about security matters, but I really do think today's meeting should be focused on getting our questions answered on the public record, and so I would humbly, submit that I think a separate meeting would be better, and it would certainly be my preference. Thank you.
No, I'm glad there's some members that feel that way, and I think we do need to have these questions. Like I said, it's just technical. Otherwise I would do it today, because no time better than the present, but we just can't because of technical difficulties. And then we have the Métis witnesses waiting to get on at 1:30. Monsieur Terrien.
Oui, très rapide.
Very quickly, I just wanted to say that on my side, I said what I had to say, and I understand that our colleague from the security services would discuss my situation. That's fine for me. If you want to discuss this in camera later on, that's fine as well. But as far as I'm concerned, we can continue our discussion on the estimates with our witnesses. That's what I had to say. Thank you.
Mr. Lukiski, I think you'll be the last speaker on this point of order.
Yeah, just very quickly, from a procedural standpoint, obviously, if we continue with this discussion in camera and we are not able to get to a vote, the estimates will still pass as if presented. So we don't have to take any time away from an in-camera discussion on a very serious issue just because we have to have a vote. It would pass regardless.
Yes, you are procedurally correct, Mr. Lukiski. That's why it's great to have people with lots of experience on the committee.
Chair.
That is true, but members still have some questions that they wish to ask in today's meeting. Yes, Mr. Doherty.
Just very briefly, we have one panel witness that is taken the time, obviously, and we never want to defer somebody or an organization, but this is an important discussion, and I wonder if it would be possible to move that witness to or add that witness to another discussion on this another day, and then instead move to in camera at 12:30, as if our Parliamentary Protective Services and Sergeant at Arms were available.
Ooh, well, we've only given them time up until 12:30, so I don't know. I guess we could ask, but the witnesses have been very difficult to secure and arrange, and they've prepared statements and given them in advance and all of that. And we do have to, and we'll talk about this at the very end, our calendar is full up until the winter break, and we need to get this information into the analysts so that we can work on our interim report and then the final report. So,
Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Tucker.
We have a motion on the floor to go in camera. Can we have that vote, please?
Okay, maybe that is the best way to resolve this.
Do we have
issue,
that motion?
maybe, then.
Point of order. Do we have that motion? Because I never heard a motion moved.
I moved.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't realize there was a formal motion, but yes,
Well, then-
of course, a discussion.
then I'd
And
like
if
to
you
s-
move that motion,
yeah.
we could have a vote.
I'd like to discuss that motion.
You'd like to discuss the motion or vote on the motion?
I'd like to discuss it.
As would I,
Okay.
please.
Okay, Ms. Pettypaw-Taylor,
Just a quick-
you're up
just,
next.
Just a quick point of order, Madam Chair. Maybe we could get some advice from the clerk. I can't recall the routine motions, but I think typically, unless we've provided otherwise, a motion to move in camera is not debatable. I think we might have a rule that says
Yes.
a representative of each party can speak for up to 3 minutes to a motion to go in camera, but I'm just looking for, I know that's been done on some committees and not others, so just looking for some
Been
advice.
informed that it's non-debatable, so we will move to a vote on this at this time. Okay, so Justin, if you could help us out with this, please.
Mr. Algabra.
Maybe you could call the question so that they know to vote.
Okay. Yes, I apologize. Members of the committee,
Yes.
the question before the committee is to proceed in camera at this point. Mr. Algabra.
Sorry, trying to find my button. No.
Ms. Duncan.
No.
Mr. Garrettson.
No.
Madame Pettypaw-Taylor.
No.
Mr. Turnbull.
No.
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Mr. Lakiski.
Yes.
Mr. Tucker.
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Vecchio.
Yes.
Monsieur Terrien.
Oui.
Miss.
Yes.
No.
Madam Chair, motion defeated.
Okay. Although the motion was defeated, I do think the issue is very important, and we'll definitely be calling the witnesses back so that we can have a fulsome discussion on this. And hopefully, if the whips can help us out, we can have it before the winter break so that especially the very timely issues can be discussed. Next up, we've got Mr. Turnbull for 5 minutes, and I think we can get the second round in the amount of time we have left before the next panel.
Thank you,
Mr.
Madam
Turnbull.
Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks to all the witnesses for their patience, and really appreciate you being here. Wow, incredible work that you've done. Honestly, I don't know how you've managed it, and I see some of you still do not have a full head of gray hair, which I'm shocked and surprised, given the challenges that you've had to overcome in service to all of us to be able to operate at this time. So want to just acknowledge that as my colleague, Mr. Algabra did, but I really feel strongly that I've got to state that outright. Really admire the work that you've done, and thank you for your leadership. I want to ask a few budgetary related questions because that really is supposed to be the focus of our discussion today, and that's my understanding. In terms of the cost of living increases, Mr. Speaker, and the contributions to employee benefit plans, can you speak to the statutory requirements? Like, those are not budget increases based on some discretion that you have. I believe they're requirements. And could you speak to that?
The statutory increases are increases that happen regardless of what happens. So 1.9% is a standard increase. I mean, it does compensate for cost of living. They're not voted on. They are put in place, and that is just pretty well standard. Maybe what I can do is pass it to our Monsieur Paquette, who can maybe go into a little bit more detail on the way it functions, but it's I believe you described it quite well, and that's the way it works. Monsieur Paquette.
So yes, exactly that. It's that being statutory, they are in the acts themselves, and we don't need to review them manually. So There's the cost of living indexes that are done for various items that are either for the operating budgets for the members or their sessional allowances and all this, so that we can move forward and the money's available for them. On the other side, the other statutory item that also there's all of the benefits relating to those various salaries, be it for members, employees, or the House administration. It's about 15.5% that we add to this, and that we have to pay for the employer share of pension plans, the employer share of the health benefits, and all the other benefits that are made available to employees. So that is, it's a rate that we must pay that is transferred to the central agencies to be able to absorb this.
Thank you very much for that clarification. And to me, these are standard items that just go without saying. So thank you very much for that clarification. I know it was brought up before about capacity, and I realize that we've expanded the capacity in a hybrid setting to operate committees and caucuses virtually. I know there's still been some challenges around securing the necessary interpretation and translation capacity, and I understand that it's a human resource issue. Is there anything being done on that front, and is there a budget implication, Mr. Therrien? You are not on mute, just letting you know. Maybe you could mute your microphone. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Speaker, maybe I can put that to you and you can direct it to whoever is best to answer that one.
The challenge has certainly been having the right people and having our people. I know they've worked quite long hours, and they have acquired further resources. To elaborate on that, I'll just pass it over to Monsieur Aubé that can tell us a little bit more about what's been going on in the background. And again, it's what's going on in the background that when you go into the bowels of the IT department and find out what's happening, you really grow to appreciate the work and the overtime and the hours that have gone into making sure that everything works well. And I got to say, I've spoken to a number of speakers from around the world, and we are the envy of the world. I mean, it has been working out very well for us, thanks to their hard work. Monsieur Aubé.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Turnbull, for the question. As you know, the interpretation services are offered by Public Works to the House of Commons as a service. We have been in dialogue with them because they understood through the summer that we need to go back to pre-pandemic levels from a committee perspective and a caucus's perspective. Having said that, through our discussions, it was clearly identified to us that they are having a human resource issue. It's just the availability and capacity of resources here in Ottawa for them to actually offer the services to us. But they are looking at different scenarios to actually have access to different resources across Canada. So I would not say that it is a funding issue, Mr. Turnbull. I would say the issue is more linked to the availability and capacity of resources for them in order to expand the services that we require here on the Hill.
So you have the budget that you need to expand that human resource capacity if needed, because it is needed, and it sounds like you're in the midst of solving that issue, but you do have the financial resources?
I've not been told by PSPC, as I said, that they're offering a service, that they have a budgeting issue. They're actually allocating more funds to try to recruit more people. So this hasn't been part of the, if I might say, the showstoppers, not the budgets for them.
Thank you, Mr. Aubé. Mr. Therrien, 2.5 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I wasn't following absolutely everything, except that I'd like to speak about the increase in costs. Perhaps I'll be repeating myself here. It seems that some money has been saved because there are less members on site. However, there's more technology being used, and there's a whole health protocol that has to be followed. So when we add all up the expenditures related to the pandemic, I would think that expenditures have been higher than one might have expected, and any savings that might have come about because of less members here might have been offset by that increase in costs. Well, that's a good question, and I'll give you to Mr. Paquette, who will be able to give you further details.
Mr. Paquette. Thank you. Obviously, that's a question that is often asked. That is, do we have enough resources for everyone? Any extra spending related to COVID, whether it has to do with connectivity or equipment, represents about $3.5 million. So these are big amounts, yes, but a lot of work has been done to be able to work virtually. Now, on the other hand, resources have been reassigned where needed in terms of increased capacity elsewhere, whether it be in the House or elsewhere. And there have been less expenditures in other areas, other updates, other technological tools, or internal projects. So we've tried to strike a balance. Now, there have been savings. For example, when it comes to travel, that represents about $9 million related to travel. I would just point out, however, that $5 million of that is statutory, so that can't necessarily be reassigned. However, when you're looking at associations and all kinds of other travel, that adds up to about $4 million. Now, in terms of equipment and material, printing, for example, restaurants, there are other events that are not happening. And so we don't necessarily have to buy the material for that. As it stands, when I look at the trends, I see more savings actually than spending related to COVID. So I understand. Thank you.
Mr. Blakey.
Thank you very much.
To the question of the voting app that had been raised earlier, I know members of the House administration said that they were consulting with the parties on that, but I also do want to emphasize, even though I'm not one of them, there are a number of members who don't belong to the parties recognized in the House of Commons, and it is important that the voting system work for them as well. So I'm just wondering what kind of consultation has happened with them in order to get their feedback on the voting app and how it might work or not work for them as members who aren't supported by a party whip's office.
That's a very good question, and I know the staff has been very thorough. Monsieur Gagnon has been taking care of that. I think I'll just pass it on to him and he can answer it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Blakey, for the question. Indeed, members of the unrecognized party are also quite interested in the voting application, and have also been interested in the way we've been managing hybrid sittings. So my office is specifically in charge of connecting on a daily, and if not more than a daily basis, many times a day, interacting with the different members of parliament, either from the Green Party or independent members. So the motion that was adopted in September directed the House administration to work very closely with the recognized party to ensure the development of a voting application. And that has taken place, and that's why you have heard of discussions taking place with the different parties. That said, we are keeping the members of the Green Party and the independent members quite aware of any development that would take place, including, for instance, very important onboarding sessions and also training sessions. We have done so, for instance, when there were some simulations taking place to ensure the Zoom voting. So yes, we are in very direct discussions with the independent members and Green Party.
Well, thank you very much for that answer.
If I could add on to that.
Et j'ajouterais
in the beginning, my biggest concern with the change in practice and going to COVID-19 measures was to make sure that all members, regardless of party, have their privilege protected and be able to express their privilege. And that's something that the House and the staff has taken very much at heart and is considered with any move that we do make.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Mr. Doherty, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just want to echo the sentiments that many of my colleagues have said. We do appreciate everything that both House administration as well as our Parliamentary Protective Services that you all put forth, the service that you put forth each and every day. So it doesn't, I know very often it goes without anyone saying thank you. So I would like to say a heartfelt thanks to you all. I guess this is for the speaker. Mr. Speaker, when are the estimates prepared? So these estimates that we're looking at today, when are they prepared?
I think I'm going to refer that one right to Mr. Bucket. He'll be able to give you exact dates on that.
Okay.
Okay, so basically, if we look at it, we're actually in the midst right now of preparing the estimates for next year.
Okay, so these would have been done pre-election 2019?
Just after the election. They would have been gone to the board in the late November, early December.
Okay, and have they been revised since COVID?
At this point here, we've adjusted the request for the supplementary estimates B, which are done usually once the fiscal year has started. And that's where we've adjusted our request for the carry forward and reduced it by the amount of the committee and associations that the funding that had been done there for events that have either been canceled or postponed. So not keeping the cash attributed to us if we didn't need to use it. So that's why we've adjusted. But at this point here, we've because we have access to the supplementary estimates, that is where we would do the adjustments had there needed to be some for the current fiscal year.
Have you had to adjust up given the additional costs in terms of hybrid and protective services and technology, or have those estimates stayed the same?
The estimates have stayed the same at this point here because we're looking at really a trade-off between some of the savings that we've had, and we've just talked about, I mentioned earlier, but some of the travel savings and some of the materials and supplies that because of some of the services that were closed during the lockdown, and those savings at this point here have been sufficient to cover the incremental cost or disbursements relating to the COVID.
Okay. One of the highlights of the new spending in this year's main estimates for the House is a program of human resources advisory services for members in our capacity as employers. What does this program involve?
I think I'd like to pass this one on to Michelle Laframboise, our CHRO.
Yes, Danielle, thank you very much for your question. So the Member Advisory Services is a team that has been put in place within the Human Resources Services to provide advisory services to members in their roles as employers. So this team does several things. One of the things that they do is they do provide individual counseling and advice on employment situations, on a variety of different human resources functions. They also put together the onboarding program and the continuous training program for members and their staff. So obviously that program is much busier after an election, but there is a fairly ongoing and constant need for continuous training and development.
So if I'm understanding that, that there's nonpartisan House staff are getting involved in recruiting, screening, and hiring political staff for MPs for their own offices?
No, they provide advice, they provide guidance, templates, tools, draft policies for members to consider if they are looking for advice. It's a consulting service. We're not responsible for the function itself. We provide purely advisory and consulting services.
Are all parties taking part in that?
That's a very good question. I'd have to go back and confirm, but my understanding is that they are.
Can you table with the committee your findings?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. In past years, when the estimates were under consideration, there were questions about a plan to place a procedural clerk directly in the Liberal House Leader's office. Mr. Robert, can you confirm that none of our nonpartisan clerks were actually placed there?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so that proposal is dead and it hasn't been revisited?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. For our Parliamentary Protective Services.
Sorry, Mr. Doherty, that is all the time we have, I guess, before you start that new question. Next, we've got Dr. Duncan, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of you. I think you've heard a resounding thank you from everyone in the committee for the tireless work you've done to allow virtual sittings. So I add my thanks as well. We work with tremendous people in the parliamentary precinct, and like you, all of us want to make sure we're doing everything to protect them. Mr. Speaker, I'm wondering, have there been any cases within the parliamentary precinct, please?
I'm sorry, can you clarify any cases
Of COVID-19 in the parliamentary precinct?
There have been. I believe there was, how many did we have altogether? Maybe I'll let...
Or if you could table that.
It was in the 30s. We'll get that information and table it to you so that you have it. It was all very well documented and very diligently taken care of. As soon as someone had any inkling of either being exposed to someone or actually testing positive, they did go on quarantine and did not come back until their time had expired. So it worked out very well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I could ask what, and I know how diligent you all are, so how many cases that we had, were they linked? Were they in certain professions? Protecting everyone's privacy, but I want to know if there was additional spread. Was there an audit or evaluation of the protections following any cases, please?
Okay, I'll let Monsieur Patrice answer this question. He'll have better access to that information.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, first we'll provide you more detailed data following this meeting if it's the agreement of the committee. But I would like to say that our occupational and health and safety team has been very active and working closely with the various public health agencies, be it from Ontario or Quebec, because we have people living in both jurisdictions. Some of the cases, and it's in the 30s, as the speaker said, I'm going to say that some people who tested positive did not contract the virus on the premises. Some never even showed on the premises that were tested positive. But they've been some cases in our parliamentary family, in the House of Commons family, that have been in the premises, and we're very active in terms of contact tracing and assisting the people in the surroundings.
So what your time is, these are cases. We just want to make sure our parliamentary family is all looked after. These are community cases from what I can gather. Who is providing the health advice to the parliamentary precinct, please? And when's the last time there has been consultation with them, please?
Yes, we've got a head nurse in occupational safety, a nurse that is actually in daily contact with the public health authority, be it the Ottawa Public Health Services or on the Quebec side, similar. And like I said, we're keep continuing updating as new information arrives. Obviously, we are attuned also to advice, recommendation that the Canada Public Health Agency is also offering. I'm going to, just for clarity, some of the cases happen on the precinct, but it's a limited number, but not necessarily contracted on the precinct.
But you will be sharing that.
Yes.
And thank you. And is there a way to consult, for example, the pages and the employees about the COVID-19 protections? Is there a formal or informal mechanism? I know what exists for the members, but for all the employees in the parliamentary precinct, and of course, anyone within the precinct.
Yes, they are. And I'm going to, for example, in terms of the page program, I'll ask André to maybe add something, but we're communicating on a regular basis with all members, all staff, and also members, staff, and MPs. in terms of communication update, in terms of the status of the, let's say, of the pandemic, in terms of how it affects us, and a constant reminder in terms of the various measures to be taken place and so on. Management is reminded on a continuing basis to be attentive to the well-being of the staff. So André, maybe if you want to add a few words.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Duncan, for the question. Yes, regarding the pages very specifically, we've taken a special attention to work not only with them, but also to continue to work with the health officials here at the House of Commons, so that we can ensure that their health continues to be our main priority. So that's why you've probably seen a couple of adjustments. First of all, in the House, there are much less pages participating in our deliberations. As well, they are seated outside the different lobbies, but always accessible to help out members or the different parties. Also, there have been other opportunities for them to help out. So that's how we have been adjusting to ensure that the pages operate in the safest environment possible.
Thank you so much. And would you be willing to table with the committee the formal and informal mechanism with consultations with the members, all the employees, because we all want the same thing in our pages. We want everybody protected. And thank you for the tremendous work everybody's doing.
Thank you. Thank you. So this ends our panel number 1 for today's meeting. And I'd like to thank all of the panelists, all the witnesses. Thank you, of course, to the Speaker of the House, Mr. Rhoda, Mr. Patrice, Mr. Paquette, Mr. Leahy, Mr. Francis and Mr. Graham, Mr. Gagnon, everyone that is here today. You brought a big team, and your answers were well appreciated. And I thank you for always taking so much time out for this committee. We know you're very busy, and we do appreciate it. But you can log off now, I guess, and we will carry on with the vote on the main estimates and the supplementary estimates. And I wanted to find out from the committee members, if we do not group the votes together, we have 6 separate votes. If we group them together, we would have 2. So we could have 1 vote on the main estimates and 1 on the supplementary estimates. Would there be agreement to group the votes together? Any opposition to grouping?
From my standpoint, I think that would be wise.
Okay. Perfect. Seeing as there's agreement and I don't hear any opposition, we will group them together. So the first vote, should I call it, Mr. Clerk, or would you
Madam
like
Chair?
to? Mm-hmm.
Oh, pardon me, Madam Chair. I was going to say I'd be happy to simply have these pass on division if it's acceptable to the rest of the committee. But.
Do we have it recorded, Justin?
Madam Chair, you don't. You can proceed if there's consent to group them all together and then indicate that they're on division if that is the will of the committee, and I could minute it accordingly.
I second that motion from Daniel Blakey.
Okay, any opposition to that? All right, then they pass on division. Thank you. So that's the main estimates and the supplementary estimates. So we are done with that, and we will welcome in
Madam Chair.
Justin.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
One just before you move on. Generally, there's also a motion asking you to report the estimates back to the House. It is a formality, but if you can just proceed with that very quickly.
Yes. Is there consent that I report back to the House?
Yes.
Okay. I will report back to the House then. Thank you so much for that. And we are going to move into our second panel
Madam
for
Chair,
today.
Sorry,
yes?
It's the clerk again, Justin. Our witness has not entered the waiting room yet, entered the meeting. We are still waiting on that person. We're trying to get a hold of them so that they can appear. So we don't have the witness as of right now.
Okay, let's move on to some of the committee business that we had. We're going to save until the end. First, just off the bat, I'd like to mention that Thursday's meeting, we're going to have 3 panels. It's going to be a 3-hour meeting, so I don't want anyone to be caught off guard, Monsieur Terrien especially, by that. So if you need a replacement for the 3rd hour, then please try to find a replacement now for that 3rd hour. We'll be going from 11 to 2 o'clock. And once again, I do apologize. I know it's going right up against QP, but it's not by my choice that we're doing it that way. Okay, and during that meeting on November 26th for Thursday's meeting, we're going to have 3 panels, like I said, for the 3 hours, 3 one-hour panels. We're going to have Professor Andre Blaise. We're going to have the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization of Manitoba. And then the second panel will have People First Canada, and then Canada Without Poverty. And then in the third panel, we will have, Justin, do we have CARP confirmed?
Madam Chair, unfortunately, CARP canceled yesterday, and so we no longer have CARP.
Okay, so we no longer have CARP, but we have the Canadian Federation of Students in the third panel, and we have the Canadian Association of Retired Persons in the third panel. So that is our meeting for Thursday. And then we also had on the 19th of November a subcommittee meeting. Everybody was circulated the report of the subcommittee. And so if you do have that before you, you were given the calendar, an updated calendar, and the report as well. The report has about 6-7 different directives that decisions that were made. I'm just wondering if everyone had enough time to look at that subcommittee report, or if they need a minute right now. And then I just needed your consent to move ahead with the letters that I have to write and some of the scheduling that has to be done accordingly. We will have a prorogation meeting. I think that's of importance to mention. And
I move to accept the minutes.
Okay. There's been a motion to move to accept the minutes of the subcommittee, the report. Is everyone okay with what's in the report?
We have a minute, Madam Chair, like you suggested, just to have a quick look over it.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yep.
You're on mute, Ruby. Oh.
Yeah, I think she's talking to the clerk.
Oh.
I think the main things to note are that we need to have our recommendations in by December 1st, 5 p.m. That's an important deadline to know. We will come to that December 1st meeting. We have a meeting that day earlier in our regular time slot, the 11 to 1 time slot, and we should bring our or all of you should bring your recommendations to that meeting, and hopefully we can hash them out a little bit during the meeting. And then by 5 p.m. later that day, they can be submitted to the analyst so that he can start incorporating, both of them can start incorporating them into our draft report. And then the other thing of notice is that Dr. Tam, we are going to ask her to just submit a brief instead of an appearance before the committee, and we're also asking for briefs from the health officers of the other provinces we've already met with, just to see if there's any further information they'd like to submit to this committee, and also in particular asking the question of whether their elections contributed to any of the cases arising in those provinces currently. And then The prorogation meeting will be on December 10th, and I would request that all parties submit one constitutional expert or academic of their choice for that committee so that we can schedule that accordingly. So I just wanted to make sure, like, it looks like everyone now maybe has enough time, they've read through it and they have an understanding of what was in it. So there's been a motion to move to pass the subcommittee report. Is everyone in favor?
Just a quick comment, Madam Chair.
Yes,
on
Mr.
item
Blakey?
2, I just wondered if we might also be able to add the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities as one of the, because I understand that the FCM had already declined, although we might be getting someone from there now due to the good effort of Mr. Doherty. But I thought that the Saskatchewan organization might offer a good perspective of what some of the challenges might have been for rural communities during a pandemic election as well.
Justin, would we be able to fit that in if there's availability?
Yes, Madam Chair, I can amend the report to include the Saskatchewan group as well. And since we're on the point, I would also let you know that I've heard back a second time from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and they still are not available to appear. So what we have an outstanding invitation out to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, and I can also get in touch with the Saskatchewan group as well.
Okay. All right. So there's been a friendly amendment. I would take it as a friendly amendment made to the subcommittee report. And is there any opposition to this report? Okay, so the report passes, and we will plan accordingly. And thank you to all the subcommittee members for taking your time out that day to help us plan our next steps. And to Mr. Leclerc, I'd like to welcome you to our committee. Thank you so much for appearing before us as a witness. I apologize for us handling some internal committee business at this time, but we saw a little bit of a gap and took that opportunity. But we welcome you, and this panel will only have you, I believe. The other witness that was scheduled to appear is unable to do so today. So thank you so much for being the voice of the Métis here at this committee today. And we look forward to hearing your opening remarks of 5 minutes. And thank you for sending those in advance as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. President Chartrand and President Chartrand were unable to make it, but they asked me to appear. I've been the lead negotiator for the Métis Nation for just over 30 years, and so I've participated in a lot of work that we've done with Elections Canada over the years. I was at one time the main researcher and clerk for the Lortie Commission that studied elections and party financing and came up with a plan to increase Aboriginal representation in Parliament, and that's in Mr. Lortie's recommended report. So I have a bit of knowledge about the electoral system, worked with former Chief Elections Officer Kingsley, and put an end to the incentivized voting bingo blotters. That's how they tried to encourage people to participate in the past. But this year marks the 150th year of the entry of Manitoba into Confederation, and it was the Métis people that negotiated that, and the banners are all over the House of Commons. And but who are the Métis Nation? The Métis Nation is primarily a Western Canadian phenomenon, merged in the fur trade. We number about 400,000. Our traditional territory includes the prairies, northeastern British Columbia, northwestern Ontario. And now we have province-wide governing members in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba. We are a very democratic nation. We've been practicing one person, one ballots for over 50 years. And so our elected leaders, our provincial leaders are elected by province-wide ballot. we've been a strong advocate of increased Métis participation in the electoral process, including and other Indigenous participation. We understand we have similar challenges to First Nations, and that many of our people live in states of poverty. We have higher incidences of homelessness, mental health issues that aren't addressed. And because we have a big part of our population in the hinterland, we have all those challenges of transportation. And we have not been that successful in employment with the electoral system. So we're not as employed there as our population warrants. We have voter registration challenges. All those have been addressed by Elections Canada recognizing our membership cards, which was a big step forward. But the biggest challenges we have is related to communications, and it's become all the more difficult in this pandemic because the Indigenous newspapers who rely on advertising for their money have been hit hard. The rural municipalities or the rural papers aren't being published as often, and so those create real challenges for Métis to understand what the parties are offering them. To be succinct in what we're recommending, and I think you've heard this before, extending the voter period perhaps over a weekend provides more distance, social distancing, provides greater access to voting stations. And the key one is, where are those voting stations? And this would open up the schools, for example. We need to ensure that returning officers have the flexibility they need to make sure that everybody's safe, particularly in the longer term care facilities where we have our people. We think that there's a need for enhanced mail-in ballot options because, some of our older people, they've taken this pandemic very seriously and they're not moving around at all. In fact, we're telling them not to move around. So we really need to expand that voting method. And I think one of the things I don't believe that this new chief electoral officer has done is met with our governing members, our province-wide members. So we'll have locals in each of our provinces of about 80 different communities where there are significant numbers of Métis. And so our governing members at the provincial level are best placed to advise the returning officers where these election boxes should be so that we can maximize our participation. And the other challenge that we have is we're in areas where there isn't broadband. And overall, though, the biggest challenge is understanding what the parties are proposing to improve the quality of life for Métis people. And that's critical. And I'll give you one example. I'm not picking on any party or anything like this, but the new leader of the opposition had come out with a platform on Indigenous things, which was good. But in the platform, he said, well, we're going to continue this national process with First Nations and Inuit. And, we've had a process with the government and structured by Accord that's resulted in $2 billion spending over 10 years. It's a very good process. Everybody has commended the process, worked real well. But either the opposition leader doesn't like the process, or he failed to communicate. And so for us, like as a people, like that's a pretty big issue. And so now with the more limited communications, we really need to find a way to address that in the pandemic election. And that's really, I think, a challenge for everybody. I'll end there.
Thank you, Mr. Leclerc. Thank you so much for representing the Métis National Council. I just wanted to remind, I didn't get a chance to say it at the beginning, but you do have interpretation. We do have interpretation available today. So if you need, at the bottom of your screen, you can choose either English, French, or floor language. If you're comfortable with both, you can choose that one. And so we are going to have formal rounds of questions now following your opening statements. And the first round will be a 6-minute round, beginning with Mr. Doherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our guest. Mr. Clare, could you tell me what the demographics of the 400,000 Métis, of the Métis population?
Well, there's about 100,000. It's hard to say because the census questions have not been accurate. We've actually just reached an agreement with the chief statistician on how to ask the question about who is or who's not a Métis. But roughly speaking, we're 100,000 in Manitoba, 75,000 in Saskatchewan, close to 100,000 in Alberta, and about 75,000 British Columbia. There are some Métis in the Northwest Territories, and there are Métis in Northwestern Ontario.
Did you say that? Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, the Northwestern Ontario that are part of the historic Métis Nation.
Okay. Would you say that your population is aging? Is of the older, or is there?
No, it has similar characteristics as of the other Indigenous populations. It's a little bit older, but half of them are under 24.
Okay. Are there whole communities similar to other First Nations, whole Métis communities that live together, or are most of the population base spread throughout those provinces?
In the hinterland or the boreal forest, we'll have majority Métis communities, and in some southern parts of the prairies. But by and large, it's very urban. It's about 60% of the population living in the major urban centers.
I'm going to shift away from our elections discussion to talk a little bit about a topic you brought up. I am the special advisor on mental health to our leader. I just wanted to know, is the Métis Nation experiencing the same mental health challenges that other First Nations are seeing in terms of suicide epidemics?
Well, there's mental challenges for sure. I wouldn't call them suicide epidemics, although we've had some. But we operate some of that child and family services in the prairies, and so we see how this is impacting, on a daily basis. So our workers are raising that. We're in the process of developing a strategy on that, and we'd be happy to share it with you once we're done.
In your view, how important is giving Métis communities access to in-person polling locations to vote within context of a pandemic election?
Yeah, we need more ballot boxes. We need to get them closer to the Métis population.
Has the Métis Nation taken the same steps as other First Nations communities by banning outsiders to coming in to their communities?
A little bit in northern Saskatchewan. There was an agreement with First Nations and Métis in northern Saskatchewan to limit the number of people going north.
Mr. Leclerc, you said that there's 80 different communities that the Métis Nation are spread throughout?
No, that's just in Manitoba.
Oh, just in Manitoba.
Yeah, we have, we're spread throughout the prairies. We were pushed off the lands in Manitoba and moved right up through to the Northwest Territories and Peace River. And so we went wherever the work was, and right. That's why we're spread throughout.
Mr. Leclerc, have you met with our leader, Aaron O'Toole, with respect to your comments?
No, but we did send him a letter, which we haven't received an answer to.
I will, on your behalf, I will endeavor to advocate on your behalf to get that.
Our hope is that was just somebody putting something together quickly, and we've turned the page a little bit at the national level on what the responsibilities there are by the federal government for the Métis Nation.
Understood. few weeks ago, the Prime Minister appeared to walk back on the promise, the government's promise to end boil water advisory March 21st in the context of pandemic election. How confident are you that we can host, and the numbers that are going up both in Manitoba and the provinces right across our country, that we can host a pandemic election given the increasing numbers?
Well, it's not going in the right direction at the moment, as everybody knows, and it's I think all the parties just need to make sure that it's going to be safe to hold the election if it's done, and that you guys play a big role in that. So
that's why we're here today, and that's why your testimony is so important. Madam Chair, how much more time do I have?
You have 1 minute.
We know a voter turnout is an issue in regular elections. You've clearly brought forth some challenges in terms of communications. What steps do you believe should be taken to ensure that voter turnout within our First Nation and Métis and Inuit communities are strong?
Well, I think our national organization, our governing members play a role in this, and I think the better we can communicate what the approaches of all the parties are, and for us to be able to communicate that to our citizens is really important. So that's why I'm saying that even anything that your party leader says, we want to make sure that goes unfiltered to our people so that they can make the right choice for them.
And with that, Madam Chair, I'll cede the floor.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Mr. McClure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Garrettson, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Leclerc, I'm actually on the Métis Nation website, and I've come across an article from 2015 regarding the Fair Elections Act that the former government have brought in place. And in that article, it says the Conservative federal government's Fair Elections Act disallowed Canadians from using the voter information cards they received in the mail as proof of identity at polling stations. It also ended the practice of vouching, in which voters with acceptable ID could attest to identity and addresses of those who lacked it. I'm wondering if you can comment on the new legislation that came through in Bill C-76 to increase the accessibility of polling locations and to ensure that culturally appropriate electoral services were available. Can you speak to the changes made between that 2015 piece of legislation and the 2019 version, and how it has affected the turnout among Métis people?
Yeah, I think I can, but this has been an endemic problem in the electoral system. And when we looked at that system to increase Indigenous representation in Parliament, in '92 we were looking at a situation where in 1992 there were only 12 Indigenous people elected to the Parliament of the 11,000 that came before, and we've had increases since then, but it's mainly because we've changed the electoral system to provide for majority Indigenous districts like Churchill River. We've got Nunavut now, and NWT is a majority. And so really the exceptions are really proving the rule. And I think we find in those jurisdictions that there's greater participation. And I think there's greater participation because, I apologize to the translators, because people see themselves in the election. And that was the biggest problem, has been, oh, it's not our system, it's not us, and because we're not seen in it. Like we have one Métis elected in Winnipeg, which was good. We had one before, Shelley Glover. But the way to increase participation is to get Métis people participating more in the election process and its operation, its administration, etc. The identity question is always identity, and how, because we have so many people living in poverty, you have to increase that system. But largely, the biggest issue has been, the elections are costly, and so they limit the number and distribution of those ballot boxes, and really that's what this new legislation tried to do. But legislation ain't going to change the practice. You have to actually go out and change it, and this election would be a good time to see whether or not expanding the number of ballot boxes increases the participation of the Indigenous population.
Okay. And in terms of accessibility to polling locations, do you find that there's been an improvement from the Fair Elections Act versus the new elections legislation in 76, C-76?
Mark, I think in theory it's gotten better, but in practice,
there's still challenges.
There are challenges.
Okay. You said in your introductory remarks, you mentioned that the electoral process can be more open to enhance Métis participation by embracing the mail-in ballots, in particular for a longer period of time. Can you tell? You also used the word enhanced. You said I wrote it down, enhanced mail-in ballots. Can you give us a sense as to how that process can be enhanced to better suit the needs of the people that you represent and to encourage Métis participation?
Yeah, well, one of the things we've been advocating for is more use of our registries, where we have all our people, not all of them, but we've got a good number of them. I know in Manitoba, for example, there's 40,000 registered Métis citizens. That's not including the children. But there's a way to make sure that and the information is confidential, but there's ways for us to use the registries to make sure that those people, particularly in the hinterland, receive the ballots so that they can get them back in. So things like that, I think we should open up discussions with the chief electoral officer on all of those.
That's a really interesting point about the registry. On the topic of mail-in ballots, and I've kind of been asking this question of almost all witnesses that have come before us in this study because of what's going on down south with respect to claims of fraudulent activity as a result of mail-in ballots. Or would you, I can appreciate that your answer would be anecdotal, but are you concerned about fraudulent mail-in ballots as a result of using them? Like, do you think that there's an increased risk of fraudulent activity from using the mail-in ballots?
No, Mark. We just had an election in British Columbia amongst the Métis, and we found no evidence in our election there that there was any problem with the mail-in ballots whatsoever.
Perfect.
And I'm sure the chief electoral officer and the systems we have in place now.
And they did. We did have the chief electoral officer from British Columbia who said the exact same thing. And I was more interested in your personal opinion on it. And I appreciate you taking the time to answer my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerritsen. Mr. Terrien.
Mr. Terrien, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Mr. Leclerc. I would expect that voter turnout must change depending on what territory we're talking about. There are about 400,000 Métis people in the western part of the country. And so I'd like to know what kind of turnout you find from region to region. Do you see any discrepancies?
Well, what we find is the Métis turnout is pretty good. In fact, this last federal election, we had our governing members working to turn the Métis vote out. So we had staff that were just looking after that in each of the governing members. So we have a pretty good civic participation rate. I mean, we have a lot of Métis mayors. Métis mayor of Winnipeg, or the Winnipeg mayor is Métis. So we've got good civic participation, and we're proud of that, and we encourage our people to vote.
Well, it goes without saying that when there are 400,000 Métis people, that is a huge democratic strength. And so I would imagine that you have to be truly well organized so that you can increase actually Indigenous representation, including in Ottawa. Now, if you want to increase Indigenous representation in Ottawa, what do you think is the most important factor in helping you get there?
Well, as we told the Royal Commission in '92, Senator Marchand, who is the chair, now passed on, was the first Indigenous person to sit in Pierre Trudeau's cabinet. You know, I've been around for the last 8 prime ministers, right? 18 ministers of Indigenous affairs. You know, I've been trying to find a way to increase the number of Indigenous people. So you saw, like in the 2008 election, for example, we have like nearly 1 million people, and we had 1 Indigenous MP elected, and that was from the Northwest Territories. So we've been very good in the electoral system of getting communities of interest to vote together. So we've, you know, look at our minority language voting groups in Quebec. We make sure we draw the boundaries around them to strengthen their ability to produce people. We do that in Atlantic Canada, and we do it to some degree. The challenge for the Métis is that we're spread so far across such a large territory that there's no ability to vote concentration except in those northern ridings. And we have Churchill River, and we produce Indigenous candidates there from all the time. So I mean, we should have, when we came up with the system, we should, we're 4% of the population in Canada. You'd think, well, we should have 4% of the number of MPs. And but our, I know this isn't on the subject, but I mean, we need to change the electoral system to make it more responsive to the Indigenous population, for sure. There's no doubt about it.
Well, even if that's not today's topic, I think that it's a very important one, and it's very important to say these things because your democratic presence has to be better represented. You represent 4%, you were saying, of the Canadian population. And so obviously there should be at least 4% of the members in the House who come from that community. Now, I'm going off on a tangent a little bit, but I think it's very important to talk about representation. Representation in voting and also representation amongst politicians. What do you think a political party should do to increase your own chances of being represented?
Back in the day, I helped create where we started first. We tried to increase representation in the national political parties. So that led, I was involved in writing the policy for the Liberal Party to guarantee representation of Aboriginal people in that party. And that came into effect in the election between Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin, the first one. And those 158 guaranteed electors got to vote on the leadership. The National Conservative Party, we worked with them. They had a conservative committee. They didn't do anything in their constitution, but they at least were paying attention to it. And, the NDP doesn't do anything structurally, but they're very friendly policy-wise to Indigenous Canadians. Now, the Bloc and the others, I mean, there's a little bit different there because it's bigger challenges sometimes in Quebec on some of those issues. But, when we say enhancing participation, it should be everywhere. We want to participate in all of these processes. And it shouldn't be marginalized to just one party. It should be, everybody should be making an effort.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey, 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to our witness for joining us. I'm coming to you today from Manitoba, the homeland of the Métis Nation. And you may well know we're having a rough go of it right now with respect to COVID, and the province is locked down quite severely. And what we're studying here at the committee is, the potential risks, not just public health risks, but the risk of disenfranchisement as a result of holding an election during a pandemic, and wanting to learn as much as we can about what those risks are. And I'm just wondering if we could hear from you what you think are the particular barriers that Métis people may face as a result of the pandemic, and if you have a few concrete action items that you think the committee ought to recommend to government in order to reduce or eliminate those barriers as best we can in the circumstances, those would be very much appreciated.
Well, that's a very good question. I know Manitoba better because my family comes from Manitoba, from Saint Lazare, Manitoba. And I've been working with the Manitoba Métis Federation and President Chartrand to address the pandemic issue. And I'll say a few things. First, we because we live in crowded conditions, we thought if it hit us, we needed to find places for the people to isolate. So we bought 7 tiny homes, moved them around the province, made those available. We turned our work camps, which we had for Bipole 3 and Enbridge Line 3, we turned them into isolation camps, and those are available. And President Chartrand made those available to the province last week, I think, because they were going to use other. So one of the things, we need to share our resources in a pandemic. That's number one. 2, this pandemic showed how vulnerable health-wise the Métis population is. Like, we were able to do food security, like our camps are full of food, in case that's needed. We can isolate, but we have no real access to the healthcare system for Métis per se, whereas First Nations have that, at least the health and nurses, etc. And it shows, in part of our national work we were trying to move on is to move down to create these Métis health hubs in the province, so that cultural safety, just better care, better results of care. But we realized that the province, and we don't have a good relationship with the premier. That's well known, but the provincial healthcare system is straining. And so what our proposal was for Canada was to say, well, okay, let's use the resources to transition, to create these health hubs, and then in the long term have them funded by the provincial healthcare system. So we were looking to transition those sorts of things. And then we asked also for resources only for our most vulnerable, only those that were under a certain income level, and only those older to have non-insured health benefits, so they weren't making trade-offs for food and medicines. So one of the lessons we've learned from this pandemic is the need to move to create that health infrastructure for Métis.
And so when it comes to the role of political parties, I know you had mentioned in your opening remarks the need to enhance communication to Métis electors on the positions of political parties. I recognize, I think there you're making a comment, a general comment, not just about pandemic circumstances, but I'm wondering what some of your thoughts are on how parties might best do that, both generally and then specifically within a pandemic context. What are some of the things that parties ought to be aware of as they conduct outreach so that they can do it better?
Well, I think it all starts at the top. I do a lot of work for the Métis nationally, and also provincially, and quite frankly, and maybe it's partly our fault too, we need to reach out to the leadership of the parties and to have that dialogue. And I think we've had it with the Prime Minister because we've had that permanent bilateral process. But I think it's especially in this kind of election, it's important for the leaders to meet and to discuss, and then to go from there.
Do you think if an election were held today, that there would be a serious risk of disenfranchisement of Métis voters because of the circumstances of the pandemic?
Well, some of our people are really take this thing seriously. So they would have to be convinced that everything was done that possible to be done, or we would disenfranchise them. That's for sure. There's no doubt about that.
I guess that speaks to some of your earlier comments. I mean, I know we've heard from chief elections officers, we've heard from public health officers who say that, they think they can set up an election that would be safe according to the rules, but that people's perception of how safe it is may be a reason why they don't vote as well. And then that's something for us as politicians to take into consideration when the House is deliberating on an issue that might cause an election. Do you have any thoughts for us as as political actors on election timing?
Yeah, well, you guys, and I'm sincere about this, you guys should figure out a way to govern for a little while, and let's see how this thing goes for a bit. That's what you should do.
Thank you, Mr. Leclerc. We should be able to get through the complete second round, and maybe if we're lucky, the first speaker on the third round, which would be Mr. Lukiski. So the second round is 5 minutes, starting with Mr. Tucker.
Yes, and thank you again for being here, Mr. McClare. Appreciate your insight and also looking at holding elections during these very trying times. Looking on the national or the Métis National Council website, it speaks about your election should be held on I believe, a provincial-wide ballot box election.
Yep.
How is that different or the same as what Elections Canada does for a general election?
It's very similar. Very similar. We have electoral districts. For example, Manitoba has 7 electoral districts, and then we have the leaders run at the provincial level, and the ballots for the president are counted in each of the 7 regions. So it's very similar. And in British Columbia, which just held an election, province-wide election, they used more mail-in ballots this election, and the same thing was true of the Métis Nation of Ontario, who also had a large number of mail-in ballots. So the process is similar.
And on that vein, I understand that there was to be a national council election in the spring, and to your previous comments, you found a way to govern without having an election during a pandemic. That's obvious because you haven't had that election. Now knowing what you know now about COVID, would you still make that same decision as to hold off on having those elections?
Well, we have a couple of other internal issues that we're working our way through, and that make it difficult to convene an election. But I think the current leadership's, if there's any risk to any citizen, and remember, we're coming from 5 provinces, so that's or 4 provinces, and so that creates risk in itself. So we're watching this thing very closely, but we want to get to an election, and we have to have the conditions that are right for it.
So you're taking into consideration just 4 provinces. Any comments on a federal election that would take in all the provinces and all the territories and all the challenges that we would face on a federal election?
Yeah, I remember voting last time here in Chelsea, and those lineups were pretty long, and in order to have the safe voting and all the rest of it, there is risks associated with voting in these conditions. And I think it's just like we're trying to find a way to govern, you guys need to find a way to govern. I think you need to hold the government to account. There's no doubt about that. And I think, from a citizen perspective, I think it's going okay. I mean, obviously, we need to see, I guess we'll see at the end of November a budget statement to see where we're at, because everybody realizes this is not sustainable for the long term. So you guys can keep it together, I think.
Well, thank you so much for your comments. I cede the floor, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Pettipat-Taylor, please, 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Leclerc, for being with us today. I always appreciate having an opportunity to meet and to exchange. Over the past number of years, I've had the privilege of meeting and working with many Métis leaders, including Clem Chartier, David Chartrand, and also Clara Morin-Dalcal, and yourself. And it's always great to be able to have candid conversations, straightforward conversations. And sometimes we agree to disagree, but I always feel that I leave those conversations just very well-informed and better informed as a result of it. I've got a few questions, and perhaps they're not all going to follow each other, but my first question that I had for you, first and foremost, would you be able to share with us the test positivity rate for the Métis population across Canada when it comes to COVID-19?
Well, I wish I could. I wish I could, but we haven't disaggregated the data against those registry records, which is something that we could do. But no, the system's not in place to do that.
Okay, thank you for that. Getting to the election process right now, could you tell the committee members what is your relationship with the chief electoral officer, or specifically with Elections Canada? And I know right now that we are in, well, first of all, we're in the midst of a global pandemic, but also we are in a minority parliament. But when would you usually have conversations with Elections Canada in preparation of the upcoming election?
Well, they would be ongoing by now. I mean, I don't know this new electoral officer pro, but Kingsley was very good to reach out and did it so on an electoral basis. And so we would expect, we have those conversations with them. By the way, is that a war picture there in the back?
It is.
Yeah. I just want to let everybody in the committee know how proud the Métis are that we finally settled for our Métis veterans.
Thank you. During your comments, or one of the responses that you gave today, you had indicated that during the last election of 2019 that you worked very hard. You said, quote, we worked very hard to turn out the Métis vote. And I'm wondering, what steps did you take, to increase that vote?
The calls. We had a team of people calling, and we identified all of our, like, we have a list of our own electors, right? So we use that and make sure that they get out. We make sure that if there's transportation issues, we arranged our, we have an 800 in Manitoba. We have 800 employees, right, that work for the Manitoba Métis Federation. So we're able to assist getting people to the poll, especially the elders. And so that's what we did. So we had a dedicated portion of the website that was geared towards this. I think they did in Saskatchewan as well. And so it was, tried to make it easy for people to understand what the positions of the parties were. The national body, we had a section, special election section, where we posted all of the material that was provided to us by the parties. We had solicited questions of the parties for on Métis issues, or issues important to Métis, and posted the answers there. So it wasn't perfect, but it was. It's going to be a little bit more challenging now, I think.
Okay. And if we look at the normal percentage of Métis that get out to vote for federal elections, would you have that number? What is the percentage of people that turn out to vote on a typical election, federal election?
Well, it's in the 70s.
It's in the 70%.
It's in the 70s, yeah.
Excellent. And we've spoke today a bit about mail-in ballots. I come from the province of New Brunswick, and I have to say mail-in ballots aren't particularly popular down here. But we certainly recognize during a global pandemic that I'm assuming with an aging population that many people are going to perhaps want to use that tool. But also we're going to have to educate people on using that. Do you think that there's specific programs or information that we're going to have to provide to Métis people to encourage them to use that as a tool as well, as you've indicated that many people are staying home because they fear the pandemic right now?
Yeah, well, and it's like in some of those northern communities that I'm familiar with, those people aren't moving anywhere, and they've been told not to move anywhere. So we're kind of sending mixed messages. So I think one of the best ways to deal with this is, and just as Elections Canada has done in the past, is to use the governing member organizations to provide that communications channel, and so to make sure that they're comforted by that.
Well, I can tell you, Mr. Leclerc, when I hear you say that your members are taking this matter very seriously, it warms my heart, because I wish that every Canadian would stay home and take the matter very seriously. We all have a role to play, and we know that this virus is very social. And if we stay home, we'll be able to flatten the curve, as Dr. Tam likes to remind us day in and day out. But through Elections Canada, do you think there's anything that they could do in order to promote mail-in ballots to make sure that people understand a bit? Okay, Madam Chair, thank you.
I thought you were ending. I was going to let you end your thought, but that's all the time we have. Monsieur Therrien?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You said that the territories are vast. Are all the locals, are they all on your territories? Those that you have to contact or work with, are they all on your territory?
I said like 60% of the Métis population will be in the large urban centers and the big rural centers, but we'll have like throughout the boreal forest there, that whole, the lung of Canada, we have communities all over there, and throughout what we consider our traditional territories, right up into the Northwest Territory. That's where our people went early on to fish, and that's where the fur trade ended, and we stayed.
Okay. I asked you the question, but I'd like to ask you again. Are you saying 60% are in urban areas and they might be a little bit closer together? It would be easier for them to vote than for people up north. And do you see a difference in the participation rate? That's pretty high, 70%. That's fairly close to what it is for the rest of Canada. Do you see a difference between urban areas and rural areas that are more spread apart?
Well, yes. I think the demographics are different. In the rural, we'll have more of an aging population. They've been there a long time. They're not flocking to the cities or anything like that. So that means that you could have a lower participation rate. But again, our civic participation is pretty strong, and we pride ourselves on
it. I can confirm with the 70%, that's very impressive. And my last question for urban areas and rural areas, when it comes to mail-in votes, do you think that people who live in the northern parts will be hesitant and harder to connect with for mailing vote?
Oh, from an administrative point of view, probably.
That's it for me. I would like to thank you. And this was very informative. I'll let the other members ask their questions. I wish you well, and to all the Métis in the Western provinces.
Thank you. Mr. Blakey.
I wanted to ask, I know you had mentioned just some, challenges around getting mail-in ballots out to folks in the hinterland, as you put it. One of the things that has come up in the course of this study is the option of voting by phone as something that they have in BC and was a part of the BC election. Just wondering if that's something that your organization has given any thought to or would have an opinion on.
Well, any way to increase the distant access to voting would be good. So, I mean, I can check with our leadership, but their main line is make it as safe as possible, make it as long as possible. That makes it safer. And if you can, avoid it until we get out of the pandemic. That's basically what our position is.
And I guess I just have a little bit of time remaining, so I'd just like to offer that time to you. If there's anything that we haven't covered in our questioning that you think is important for our consideration as a committee on the topic of pandemic elections, I just want to give you whatever time I have remaining to
okay. Well, thank you.
That.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And this is something I think that came up with the Assembly of First Nations, and this is the voting date. We have a fixed voting date in October, and that's hunting season generally, which we, in Manitoba at least, we regulate that hunt. And that's something that you might want to consider shifting that date eventually. I mean, I think the fixed election, all that's fine. It's not the most convenient time of year for Indigenous harvesters.
Thank you, Mr. Leclerc. Ms. Vecchio, please.
Thanks very much, and thank you very much for joining us today. As you indicated, typically there's about a 70% turnout in your elections. You had mentioned that to Ms. Duncan. Has that grown? Has that number increased over the last number of years, or what was your starting point? I should ask.
Yeah, it's grown. It's grown every election.
Excellent, fantastic.
Well, I can't say every election, but it's been the trend. The trend lines is growing because, one of the things that, especially in the federal election, because, until 5 years ago, really the federal government really had claimed very little responsibility for the Métis people. They provided employment and training. They provided governance funding, but now that's expanded now to include early learning, housing, support for post-secondary education assistance.
Excellent.
So our participation in the election was to try and push for the things that the people needed. So this is why our participation was always a little bit higher.
Awesome. Do you know how currently, we're just trying to think, you had talked about the number of Métis that should be representing here in the House of Commons. Do you know approximately how many there are at this time that are members of Parliament that have Métis?
Well, Danny Vandel, our Northern Affairs Minister, is proud Métis from Manitoba. Michelle Rempel comes from Métis heritage, but she doesn't identify as Métis. And we've got a couple senators that have been appointed.
Yeah. Excellent. I think when we're going through them, we were even thinking within our own caucus. I know that Mark Dalton happens to be there, and I think Mark Saray, who is also one of the Liberal sitting members, I think we figured out just sitting here 6 or 7. So I think that you've done a tremendous job to make sure that it is recognized, that it is important to have all people from across this great nation here in the House of Commons to help on that. When we're talking about the pandemic, some of the concerns that I heard from other groups was having people from Elections Canada come onto either reserve or onto the lands of the Indigenous persons or people. And I'm just wondering, has there been any issues where you don't want, or any parts of Canada where they're saying we don't want Elections Canada to come here and put a polling station? Has there been any pushback?
Well, I can certainly. There in Saskatchewan, there were. The First Nations and the Métis decided that there wasn't going to be any visitors up there. Never mind Elections Canada visitors, and I think that's a risk in all the northern parts of of Western Canada. And so, it's nice to see the Southerners, but maybe not so much in the pandemic.
Oh, and I totally agree and fully respect where you're coming from on that. But what would your recommendations?
Thank you, Ms. Vecchio.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Mr. Turnbull.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Mr. Leclerc, it's great to see you, and thanks. I'm really finding all your testimony straight and to the point and really helpful, and I appreciate that the way you cut through much of the stuff that politicians deal with. So I appreciate that. I want to go back to mail-in ballots. We've heard over and over and over again just how important that process would be in a pandemic election. This is really what we're here to discuss, is how do we ensure that a pandemic election, if it should happen, nobody really wants that, of course, but if it should happen, how do we make sure that all people can participate safely and exercise their democratic right? So the Métis people are a priority, and I think you've outlined many ways in which you've overcome many of the challenges in the past, and you've also spoken to enhancing mail-in ballots. So I just wanted to give you some more time. Are there specific things that you think we can do, or that Elections Canada can do, to streamline that process, make it simpler and easier? I think you spoke to what I heard you say earlier was timelines, having more time and having the voter registration cards and other aspects of the kit be sent out earlier. Are there other aspects of that process that you can tell us about that could or should be improved?
Well, I think that your committee should recommend to the chief electoral officer that there's a process of engagement with Métis governing members to ensure that the ballots go to the people that they should go to, and we'll do our part to encourage people how to vote, encourage them to vote and how to vote, and we can work with the Election Canada on that basis. So I mean, our governing members will be completely engaged in this election and making sure we try and get every vote out that we can. It's up to people to choose who they vote for, but it's our responsibility to make sure that they do vote. And so we take that very seriously and would work in advance with the chief electoral officer to make sure that those communities are targeted that have Métis people in them.
I appreciate that, and I will certainly bring that forward as we move towards making recommendations, and we'll keep that in mind. And your point is very well taken that that the Métis National Council is a key partner in making that happen. When do you think that process should start? And I understand you haven't necessarily been contacted yet by the chief electoral officer to date. So when do you think that process should start?
I think this process has started that process. So I think we should get on that right away. And I mean, we don't know how we're hoping you guys will govern for a period of time longer while we can work some of these things out. This is just precisely why we need to start those conversations sooner rather than later. And you guys dragged the puck on the hill for a while.
Okay. Thanks very much for that. We'll do our best to continue to govern. The other question I have, and you brought this up, which was about communications, and this has been important to me throughout this study. I know you had mentioned it within the context of parties making more effort to communicate with Métis people across Canada, and I really value that point. I also wanted to just check with you whether you think Elections Canada could be communicating more effectively if there were a pandemic election, of course, to reassure people of the safety of the voting process. And so is there any recommendations you have? Are they similar to the mail-in ballot process? I take it that they may be, but are there specific methods for communicating that Elections Canada could use?
Yeah, we've worked with Elections Canada and Stats Canada actually to encourage Métis participation in the census. And there's ways we've target our communications at the regional level and through our meetings to make that happen. And as you know, the biggest demographic and the lowest participation rates are by the Youth Canada. And we need to, this is why we work with them to target stuff at that demographic to ensure we increase their participation as we go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Leclerc. No more questions, Your Honor.
You. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Leclerc. Thank you so much for coming before committee today. I was really hoping to get in one more speaker, but we are past 1:30 now and at the end of our second round. So we really appreciate your input. Actually, it's given us a couple of things to take back to our government, I'm sure. And also, I'm sure the Chief Electoral Officer has been listening to this testimony as well. He's been following this study. So I think some very important contributions you've made to make sure that we can do better to make sure that everyone has their rights protected, right? And their right to vote in federal elections. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I look forward to future conversation on how we can increase the number of Indigenous MPs in the House of Commons. That's a much larger conversation, but I look forward to that in the future. So nice to see you all.
We would welcome that, and I look forward to that day as well. Okay. So thank you. And thank you to all the members of the committee. We've already resolved, I think, the few issues that we had, so no need for any committee business at this point. And hope you have a good rest of your day. I'll see you on Thursday. We have 3 hours for Thursday. Reminder again. Thank you. Bye.
See ya.
Thank you.